Welcome into Surviving Paradise, the podcast that takes a sometimes serious, oftentimes humorous look at the claim by the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses that they are providing a modern-day spiritual paradise. I'm your host here, Stacy Bauman, former elder, ministerial servant, and a kid raised as a witness in the 70s and 80s. As I like to do, especially on subjects like this week, we try to have some fun here, but a little bit of a trigger warning. People are on different paths, healing at different rates, maybe just exploring. If you're a Jehovah's Witness, please stay. Each episode has my own brand of sarcasm, humor, and my own experiences. Never meant to offend anyone, simply my take. Stay with us. Walk through paradise. Okay. If you've listened to this show for any amount of time, you have likely figured out that I'm most interested in the social, mental, emotional, and familial impact the religion of Jehovah's Witnesses has on human beings. If you're new here and you think I'm going to break down the annual service report or go deep on the corporate infrastructure that makes up the organization Jesus allegedly chose to speak for him, you will likely notice those subject matters don't show up here very often. They're far and few between. When I examine my personal experience as a Jehovah's Witness, as well as how it impacts those I know, or have even sent me notes and emails recently, I've arrived at the conclusion that I'm far more comfortable talking about the nuance or the unspoken, even difficult to explain matters that have left scars on those that bought into the promise that all of us will soon live on a paradise earth, with no need for an orthodontist or a chiropractor or even vitamins B12 and vitamin A, since you can only get those from animal meat, and we won't be eating the cows or fish anymore. We're just going to spend all of eternity frolicking with them. So that's what this is for. People that bought into that program and are still kind of struggling with the aftermath of reality. And for that reason, I had a particular subject on my mind this past week. And yes, it's one I've mentioned before, but didn't take the time to see if I've ever covered in depth by looking at past episodes. My memory isn't very good. It happens to be something I'm personally very sensitive about and always have been. Not just because I experienced it firsthand, but because it not only confused me at times, but seeing how many other Jehovah's Witnesses and their children were impacted by it all as well. All of that really weighed on my heart. And in the spirit of transparency, I have no idea where I'm going with this. I know, you've heard it before. Other than to just share my own experiences and feelings on something that is not only a growing problem around the world, but in my opinion has been a particular challenge within Jehovah's Witnesses for many decades. And as always, remember, Jehovah's Witnesses are the happiest people on earth. How can they have these kinds of challenges? It's a legitimate question. And then there's this message from me to you. Big, big hugs to anyone listening that can relate to anything that now follows. I want to consider the dangers and the vulnerabilities of the single-parent family, especially those inside Jehovah's Witnesses. I've shared before I was raised by a single mother from the ages of 3, maybe 4. It's a little fuzzy. My younger brother and sister were always raised by only my mother. I have only one memory of my father from when I was a toddler, and it isn't a good one. We don't need to share. We'll just leave it at that. My mother started her parenting journey at 18 years old with me, her firstborn. And she is truly my hero in so many ways. And one of the many reasons I know the importance of good mothers. I put a big emphasis on mothers. That's my experience. They're so critical to the development of their children. But single-parent families have their own set of challenges. And I wish I could say that children without both parents is improving or changing, but it's not. In fact, the single parent family unit is only growing. It's gotten worse. And when you consider these staggering numbers, consider that there is virtually no way to measure the impact to those of us raised by one parent, how we see the world, or how it molds our paths and our emotions. But to try to deny that it does is patently ridiculous. And this even includes those that may have been raised by a single parent in Jehovah's Witnesses. And now for some of those staggering numbers about single parent families. According to the NIU SSP, the news magazine of the International Union for the Scientific Study of Population, it's such a gut punch, that disseminates all the scientific findings from population research carried out all over the world, the single parent family arrangement or unit is growing. It's only grown. And I'm going to here mostly focus on my own country where I'm from, but certainly look up the report. Your country's there, trust me. I'm going to focus on the United States, where the NIU SSP tells us, quote, in 2023, nearly 1 in 4 children in America aged 0 to 17 years, totaling about 19 million, were living in a household without their biological step or adoptive father, mostly with their mother, 85% of the cases. In fact, living in a single-parent household with a father absent is the second most common U.S. living arrangement, and the proportion of these households has doubled since 1970, according to the Census Bureau. According to a global survey of 130 countries conducted in 2019, the United States had the highest rate of children living in single-parent households of any nation in the world, at about 23%, or more than 3 times the worldwide level of 7%. The United States was followed by the UK at 21%, Russia at 18%, France at 16%, and Canada at 15%. For decades, the share of U.S. children living with a single parent has been rising, accompanied by a decline in marriage rates and a rise in births outside marriage. The percentage of U.S. children living in a single-parent household has nearly tripled between 1960 and 2023, increasing from 9% to 25%, according to the U.S. Census Bureau of 23, end quote. And I feel like I got to go watch The Notebook or some kind of rom-com just to cheer myself up. Romance, people. Wow, staggering. I'm not going to lie. This is really depressing to me. Children and single-parent families impacted. Even as mankind has made advancements in science, in medicine, and technology, mankind is failing at what makes life the most enjoyable: a strong family unit. You can almost hear the Jehovah's Witnesses screaming, well, yes, Stacy, of course. These are the last days. These are undoubtedly the last day of the last day of the last seconds of that last day. And I'm here saying they're ignoring the obvious because it doesn't particularly feel good. Are you ready, J-Dub apologists? For example, you can see last week's podcast on divorce and marriage among you guys, Jehovah's Witnesses. I'm in an odd spot here when I say that it is almost always women and children. And that's odd for me to say, and I'm being respectful because I've shared that I myself at one point was a single father who had full custody of my son and raised him alone. But you're not going to see that in society very often, nor are you going to see that in your local kingdom hall. It's mostly very strong women, exhausted, doing it all by themselves, alone. And it's here that I'm not yet fully healed, and doubt I ever will be, because I can still feel the anger on such things. Why? Because make no mistake, Jehovah's Witnesses smell the vulnerability in single parents. They can spot it. They can spot it a mile away. And they're even trained to look for ways to engage people in their ministry, to hammer on their weaknesses or something that's obvious by simply observing their circumstances and leveraging it into a conversation about, guess who? Jehovah's Witnesses. You're crippled? You're walking with a cane? Yeah, they're going to jump on it, living forever without your cane. And now for my weekly disclaimer on sensitive subjects. Yes, I'm here painting with a broad brush here, so please know that there are many really good-hearted Jehovah's Witnesses that care or have cared about single-parent families and truly show that love to people like my family. There really, really are. I had several people that were incredibly kind to me and my family, and I will never, ever forget them. Ever. I still think of them often. They deeply impacted my life and how I treat others. I will forever be indebted to them and their kindness, their example. Really amazing people. Some, if not all of which, have passed and are no longer allowed to speak to me when they could for obvious reasons. I get emotional just thinking about them as people, not the religion. Because they would have been these kind of people in any religion. They were good people. So with that said, it doesn't wash away what I believe to be a stated fact. Single-parent families are very vulnerable to Jehovah's Witnesses. My own mother was. And I've seen countless other single parents that were as well. As is the case with so many single-parent families, that parent is juggling their own pain, their own emotions, loneliness, the fatigue, and what is almost always a very, very heavy financial burden. It's very heavy. In fact, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, it takes $234,000 today to raise a single child. This inevitably means that mom or dad is working full-time, scrambling their responsibilities daily, and almost never spending as much time with their kids that they would if both of the parents were around. 2 minus 1 doesn't equal 2. You're always at a deficit as a single parent, and the kids feel it, as does mom. So imagine, if you will, for a minute, being in this whirlpool every day, and one day, a couple of smiling women show up to your door to tell you that they have all the answers to your problems. They can show you where God has told them that she will soon live in a paradise, play with koala bears, and never have to work again. That she will sleep well, she'll be young and pretty forever, and so will her kids. And if she just accepts their Bible study, she might even meet a really nice man at the local Kingdom Hall and get another shot at love and marriage. Or, even if she lost her mate in death tragically, she would get to see him again very soon in paradise. I've always found it ironic and deeply deceitful that they leave out the part about never being together again as a couple because resurrected people stay single forever, according to Jehovah's Witnesses in paradise. Just insane when you think about it. But people, even witnesses bravely hear, that is exactly the Jehovah's Witness pitch to single parents. And if you want to blow this off, be my guest. But this was never taught by Jesus anywhere in the Bible, this paradise thing. He didn't do it. It only suddenly appeared in 1935 at a convention in Washington, D.C. of the United States when Judge Joe Rutherford realized that, well, capping it at 144,000 going to heaven, it's not going to last very long. We need to account for all these other people that are coming in. And folks, it's an absolute lie. But what a sales pitch, particularly to a single parent. Cruel doesn't begin to cover it, Because for the desperate, exhausted, lonely single parent and the kids, this all sounds better than the new Nikes they saw all the other kids wearing at school, but you can't afford. It sounds like a dream. And a dream is exactly what it is. We are all, as human beings, susceptible to this. But worn down, exhausted, lonely parents are more so. Desperate people spend most of their waking moments looking for relief from the stress they're experiencing every hour on the hour. If you're thirsty, what sounds good? If you're hungry, if you're tired, water, food, sleep. Imagine the guarantee of all the above. You see, desperate people, including the strong, loving single parent, are open to any kind of relief from their grind. And the leadership of Jehovah's Witnesses, despite there being some very well-intentioned people that are witnesses, have always known. They've known this. They have found ways to fill the void of the single parent. From Ann Moss Rogers of Mental Health Awareness and Education, in her article, Desperation Breeds Vulnerability, she stated, quote, "Everyone is a bit panicked, uncertain, anxious, and some are holding on to their mental health for dear life during this pandemic. And if you're not feeling like this, then a friend or relative you know probably is. When we feel desperate and stressed, we are at our most vulnerable and tend to make decisions based on fear and not practicality or science. That makes us targets for scams, schemes, making rash decisions, and irrational, desperate moves because our thought processes are compromised." Jehovah's Witnesses will tell you that they have the answers to everything and anything you might be dealing with. In a world filled with stress, anxiety, endless challenges, the entire infrastructure of Jehovah's Witnesses is built around targeting a person's vulnerabilities. Period. Hard stop. I've shared this on this show before, that they will even literally do this stuff in a cemetery to someone who is grieving someone who has died and freshly buried. How about just one example from their website? The 2007 Yearbook of Jehovah's Witnesses, page 198, shares just such an experience of targeting someone's vulnerabilities. It tells us on page 198, quote, "When Yuri first arrived in Latvia, he spoke to a woman who was tidying up a grave. He recalls, when I asked her why life seems so short, she took a few steps toward me and we talked. Minutes later, a large branch broke off a tree and crashed to the ground right where she had been working. Had she stayed there, she would have been crushed. She gave me her address and I arranged for a sister to visit her. In 1987, the woman, her son, and her daughter-in-law were baptized." End quote. Of course they were. Of course they were. Just a snippet out of the 2007 yearbook that exposes Jehovah's Witnesses and their keen desire to target your vulnerabilities. You see, Jehovah's Witnesses don't just give you hope, they literally save your life, as is the case with this woman in Latvia. Not only did this brother approach a woman, grieving someone who had died at the grave site, but if that man hadn't shown up at the cemetery to target vulnerable, grieving people, this woman, at least the message the governing body wants you to take away, would have been crushed by a tree branch. No word yet on how the angels were involved. They might have been at the book cart. But look, this guy was in a grave site in a cemetery, approaching people mourning dead loved ones, and took a chance to target them for Jehovah's Witnesses. Thank God he saved her from the flying tree branch. And this is the same messaging to single-parent families. They, the witnesses, can save you from all of your stresses, maybe even tree branches that are dropping. I know that you're likely thinking, well, yeah, I mean, of course, it isn't rocket science, and you're right. That is why it works, obviously, target people's vulnerabilities. Women, or should I say mothers, are particularly vulnerable to Jehovah's Witness messaging. So you may think this is obvious. Consider some startling statistics from the 2016 Pew Report study on Jehovah's Witnesses. These are really uncomfortable, folks. Really uncomfortable, some of these statistics. How about this one? From the 2016 Pew Report, most Jehovah's Witnesses, roughly 2/3, or 65%, are women, while only 35% are men, end quote. And with all deep respect to the ladies, I think we can all agree that your biological makeup around emotion is much easier to take advantage of from dishonest men who want to manipulate you. But if you're working for the perfect cocktail to vulnerability, consider one more point from this report that makes the single mother vulnerable to Jehovah's Witnesses. Number 2 here is, quote, compared with other U.S. religious groups, Jehovah's Witnesses tend to be less educated. A solid majority of adult Jehovah's Witnesses, 63%, have no more than a high school diploma, compared with, for example, 43% of evangelical Protestants and 37% of mainline Protestants, end quote. Yeah, because women tend to be more religious on this planet, making single mothers particularly vulnerable to the messaging and consistent regimen of Jehovah's Witnesses. You see this in almost every congregation you'll visit. Several single-parent families, almost always led by a mother, keeping her kids on schedule at the Kingdom Hall that week. But if you're really paying attention and you're really observing, if you look closely, you will see that she is often exhausted, and the meetings almost appear to be a break for her as she sits there trying not to go to sleep. And trust me, I saw many a mother dozing during the meetings. I know the content is really powerful and the speakers are really good, but that's a separate subject. They're usually not even learning much. They're just taking a break. And I know that might offend some people. It's not meant to. It's simply the truth. It's all this mother, this woman can do to be there. Outside of not celebrating birthdays or Christmas or taking a blood transfusion or believing God's name is Jehovah, very few of these single parents, these women in most cases, but some men, can even articulate what they're being taught at meetings of Jehovah's Witnesses. Most of them have no time to study. They don't follow up on anything that's said on the stage. And this is not in any way an insult. It is, in fact, a fact. I've witnessed it, I've lived it, and it is not rare. And I know that this might be true in all religions, but most religions don't teach you that you're never going to die. Most religions don't teach you that you may just walk right into a paradise earth. There's going to be a bit of a genocide. Ignore that. Step over that body, please. You're going to walk right into a paradise with your kids where you will meet my guy Noah and find out exactly how he was unable, or was able, I should say, to remain celibate, not having sex till he was over 500 years old. Or you will at least be able to ask about his method of contraception. We're unsure. Bible doesn't share. I mean, he gathered the animal kingdom, all the unique foods, kept them from eating each other, built an ark by hand. Oh, and he somehow had time to go out in field service. And after a week of work, school, meetings, loneliness, and financial stress, this parent wants to talk to my guy Noah because they just really wanted to sleep in on Saturday morning, but we can't have that. Just like him, someone needs that watchtower slid under their welcome mat right now. You just never know. You're saving lives. You might be exhausted. You might be lonely. You might be dealing with clinical depression as a single parent. But quit your bitching about hitting the national average in door knocking, even if that average is completely fabricated by an organization in upstate New York. And as kids of single parents, I can tell you the one thing you're looking forward to in this dynamic is that someone might buy you a donut on the coffee break. Yeah, that's as good as it got. And man, thank you to all the amazing and wonderful people that did buy me donuts. Sweethearts, never forget you or your face. For anyone listening that was or is a single parent family inside Jehovah's Witnesses, you know what I speak of here. This is something that non-JW single parent families don't deal with, which truly tells you the inner strength of those amazing single parents that are witnesses. Adding that heavy schedule, dare I say guilt, that comes with the life of a Jehovah's Witness single parent. It is incredibly heavy. But that doesn't stop the governing body. Even when they know this is what a single parent is going through inside their little spiritual paradise they've made for them. They know what single parents are enduring. It doesn't stop them from the schedule, from the workload, or from the guilt. From the Awake magazine of February 8th, 2005, the series Stress, Its Causes and Effects, under the subheading The Pressures on Single Parents. The guys in New York say this, quote, single parents, likewise, face high levels of stress as they try to meet the needs of their families. Getting up early to prepare breakfast, dressing children, dropping them off at school, rushing to be at work on time, and then dealing with the demands of a job may leave a single parent physically and emotionally exhausted. And when a mother's workday is done, another cycle of stress is set in motion as she hurries off to pick up her children from school, fix dinner, and care for household chores. Maria, I apologize. Maria, a single parent with 4 teenage daughters, compares her life to a pressure cooker, saying, the pressure can build up so much that I feel as though I will explode. End quote. Wow. Explode. Spontaneously combust from the workload, Freudian slip, workload, and stress and guilt that is put on a single parent in this organization. And they know it. I just read it to you in print. But in case you're wondering, mothers like Maria will go virtually ignored in the congregation week after week until she gets a call from an elder asking for her field service time. I know, I get it, that's gone. But for the younger generations, a single mother or parent would often go completely ignored, meeting after meeting, as she brings her kids in, locking hands to sit in the Kingdom Hall. But man, when they needed her field service report, that elder would call her on the 30th of every month. It happened a lot back in the day, even though they don't even do that anymore. You know, Jesus had a change of heart on all of that recently, if you're not up to speed. No more counting time. And I'll give you an example that just popped into my head. I've related this story before, but I went back at one point to my hometown of San Rafael, California. It was 1996, and I stayed at the home of a wonderful, wonderful woman who really was like a second mother to me. We had found her in the 70s in the ministry. She came into Jehovah's Witnesses, and she had drifted away from Jehovah's Witnesses when we had moved. We came back to visit her in 96. Imagine my surprise. Man, I'll never forget this. When an elder I'd grown up with as a kid and hadn't seen in like 15 years at that point showed up at her door on Saturday. She opened the door. He was shocked at her face. I was in the background. I recognized him immediately, and I watched on as he told her to her face that he had no clue where she'd went or that she even lived there. And I was sitting there at this point, an elder myself in 1996, thinking, what? You've lost track of one of your sheep? You didn't even know she lives here? She's a single mother of a daughter. I sat there in awe, watching an elder I had looked up to as a boy admit that they had completely lost her years ago. I wondered at that point, is he about to ask her for her field service reports over the last 10 years? Very important stuff after not seeing her for many years. It's alarming to me, the pressure this religion puts on single-parent families. And oh yes, I'm going to get into what they call solutions to that, because of course they've got all the answers. But that story left a deep impression on my mind. At that point, I was a young elder watching an older elder I admired admit that Jehovah's Witnesses prey on the vulnerability of single parents. They get ignored most of the time once they're in. But even as this organization is asking for financial donations, pushing a single parent to evangelize more, or asking you to clean the Kingdom Hall on Saturday, they also know that those single parent families are experiencing this. From the same Awake from 2005, February 8th, under the stress and its causes and effects, they said this to single parents, quote, whether you are young or old, or the stress in your life comes from work or school, chronic stress can take a heavy toll on your health. One medical writer explains the stress response of the body is somewhat like an airplane readying for takeoff. Yes, when you feel stress, your heart rate and blood pressure soar. Your levels of blood sugar rise. Hormones are released. If stress becomes persistent, the same writer continues, all parts of the body's stress apparatus, the brain, heart, lungs, vessels, and muscles become chronically over or under activated. This may produce physical or psychological damage over time. The list of illnesses in which stress may play a role is alarmingly long. Heart disease, stroke, immune disorders, cancer, musculoskeletal skeletal disorders, and diabetes, to name just a few. End quote. What a mouthful. How damn depressing. Even as I read that paragraph in the Awake, they're putting this on single parents. Jesus is telling people who are worn out to come to him. His load is light. He will refresh them. Jehovah's Witnesses lost track of my friend, my second mom. But when they found her, they tried to drag her back to the Kingdom Hall and tell her to get back out in field service. And I'll tell you, it just brings to mind so many memories that I'll never forget. And look, I'm an older guy now, in my 50s. But sister, to my mom, I noticed your son's white dress shirt wasn't pressed, or his dress shoes weren't shined up. I kind of noticed he doesn't have a book bag for field service. By the way, do you have a Bible study with all of your kids? I'm sure you got plenty of time. We heard your kids, we heard they were playing with worldly kids in your neighborhood. I noticed your son isn't in the theocratic school. Can you help him write talks, please? Your daughter's hair. Well, that style she's wearing is quite worldly. On and on it goes. Those are just examples off the top of my head of conversations elders had with my mom. Even as the stress of keeping Jehovah's Witness standards, which incidentally are found nowhere in the Bible, nowhere, is adding unimaginable stress to the single parent's life. And by extension, the kids. I just want to ride my bike with Tommy. Nah, he's a bad guy. He's going to die at Armageddon. But he or she father or mother, they hang on for dear life. They love their kids. They want them to live in paradise. They keep the schedule because that is their one and only shot to save their kids from a life of misery. All of what I'm stating here is deeply ingrained in Jehovah's Witness culture, whether they want to admit it or not. And while I'm a kid of the 70s and 80s, kids today inside Jehovah's Witnesses are growing up the exact same way. There's new sets of problems, social media, cell phones, yeah, but it's the same stuff. And eventually, the single parent realizes this. From the December 2010 Watchtower under the subheading, Show Consideration for Single Parents, we are told this from the governing body, quote, Kathleen, a single parent who brought up 3 children, says she will never forget this sage advice. Expect nothing. Appreciate everything. Like Kathleen, many single parents recognize the personal responsibility they have to raise their children. Therefore, they do not expect others to do for them what they must do for themselves. Nevertheless, there is no doubt that they appreciate any assistance they receive. You can contribute to their well-being and your own happiness by showing consideration for single parents, confident that Jehovah God will reward you for what you have done. End quote. And the only thing I can say is, yeah, they got you. They got you. Gotcha. You got baptized. You're now on the inside. You're a witness. And it's then that the illustrations of paradise, of elephants, and a lifetime of fruit bowls, well, they don't have the impact they did when they first found you. They kind of start to fade into the weekly schedule. And they literally expose themselves with this reference I just read from the December 2010 Watchtower. She said it in print, much like Maria earlier, who said she would explode from the pressure. This mother said her wise sage advice, exact words, were to expect nothing. Appreciate everything. Wait, what? Did they in print just promote an expect nothing mentality for single parents and Jehovah's Witnesses? Again, there are many good J-dubs who are very kind to single parent families, but that's not what this is about. I'm not afraid to tell you it's not the norm. It isn't. That's what makes them very special people when they are kind. And they just put that and admitted it in a Watchtower. Expect nothing. Okay. That's not the message I got when you showed up at my door with pictures of giraffes. And while some will minimize such an attitude as human imperfection or any other list of things, take it from a kid that has lived it. This is real, folks. And it's here that even I haven't let go of all the resentment. Not just for fooling single parents into a fantasy invented by a whack job clown in New York during the last century, but for outright lying and ignoring their own Bible and what their own book says about widows, single people, and fatherless boys. All kinds of scriptures, not going to mention them here. Feel free to go look it up. But then there is the wise advice from the faithful and discreet slave and Jesus in heaven, by extension, to single parents who are trying to cope with all these problems, all these pressures. But there's other unique things that the governing body and this organization has felt free to comment on for single parent families. And by extension, make no mistake, folks, the mood, the stresses, the emotions of the single parent are transferred to the children. It's an inevitable part of life. But you'd be shocked at what this organization has done to target very private vulnerabilities of single parent families, and particularly the single parent. You see, as if financial problems, grotesque exhaustion, and the organization's pressure to do more isn't enough on the single parent, it's important to consider, respectfully, some additional advice from the guys in New York, directed at single parents who really haven't gotten any in a long time, if you know what I'm saying. Okay? Yeah. They felt free to comment on a single person who's likely in the prime of their life, just a single parent, missing the normal desire for sex. I know. Sensitive subject for most, not for me. Just part of life. But did you know that the governing body has also targeted the vulnerabilities of a single woman or man raising kids alone when it comes to their sexual needs? You didn't know they commented on this too? Well, I got news for you. They have. Nothing is off the table with Jehovah's Witnesses and what's going on even in the privacy of your family. And it is literally, in case you're wanting to look this up, under the subject of parenting in the online Watchtower library. Allow me to share. Sex between two consenting adults, even if they are a single parent, and should be one of life's greatest joys. Look, let's call it what it is. It really is one of life's greatest joys. Good meals, good sex with someone that you really love or are attracted to. But if you're a single parent in Jehovah's Witnesses, as if it wasn't tough enough, you can forget it. You're done with that part of your life. But wait for it. Wait for the kind of wisdom a horny single parent can only find inside Jehovah's Witnesses. From the Watchtower of September 15th, 1980, on the article series that lives between pages 17 through 19, Jesus turned his attention to the single parents, not to help them eat or find safe housing or to give them money or to even buy their little guy's son a new pair of meeting shoes. No, Jesus from heaven instructed the governing body to address what they should do when they long to be touched by another person. And if you don't take heed of this, please do. Notice the writing style of the reference. I can only bet that the guy, and yeah, I said guy, on the writing committee committed a very private, shall we say, personal sin the night before he wrote this. I'm going to leave it alone there. It rubs me the wrong way. Okay. Ba-doom bish. The note from the governing body, the September 15th, 1980 Watchtower, page 17 through 19. Quote, many single parents ache. Sorry. Oh my. Okay. As a guy who's a real wordsmith, I just love this. I'm going to start over. Quote, many single parents ache for the warm companionship of marriage and the intimacies of the marital bed. Certainly, such feelings are not wrong in themselves. The desire to remarry is natural. The problem comes when a person decides to satisfy these sexual impulses regardless of the cost. Therefore, the Bible urges, deaden your body members as respects sexual appetite. But how? By guarding your mind and heart. If you were trying to diet and control your appetite for food, would you read magazines containing pictures of delicious foods? Or would you watch TV shows about cooking? End quote for a moment. This is a masterpiece in stupidity. It is just wonderful. It is incredible. Aside from the seriousness of the subject, because I was at one time as a single man in the prime of my life, I know what it means to, how'd they say it here? Ache for the warm companionship of someone else, the intimacies. It's serious. But to go on to write that you should deaden your body members, and if you were on a diet and trying to control what you eat, would you watch cooking shows? I guess they don't realize that even though you're on a diet, you still get to eat. But if you're horny and you miss being with someone special naked, you can't even nibble. Okay, folks? Really bad illustration by this guy, whoever wrote this. Let's finish the reference because it just gets better. Back to the quote. Would you associate with people who constantly talked about food? Hardly. It is the same with sexual appetite. One widow frankly stated, "We're in a world that just never stops talking about sex. So I am quite careful about my choices of entertainment and with whom I socialize. A diabetic would surely not want to press his nose to the window of a candy store." End quote. And there it is. Something that is 11 years as an elder I never witnessed. A widow or single sister coming to tell me that she was hot and bothered, and it was a lot like being a diabetic. Now, I can't say that I experienced that, and I experienced almost everything as an elder. A young sister comparing her sexual desires to diabetes and a candy store. I really want, well, but I got to stay away from the Snickers bars because they look a little too, never mind. Okay. This is spiritual food at the proper time. This is how a single parent's vulnerabilities, just wanting some attention, to be desired, to be touched by another consenting adult, this is how it's handled inside of Jehovah's Witnesses. And while I laugh, you can't believe how I laughed at this, it really isn't that funny. It's devastating. To a young woman or man who's a parent, who never gets to even speak to adult, much less talk to one because they're wrangling kids all the time alone. It's just insane. But what an illustration from the governing body. And call me crazy, while I love a bucket of buttery popcorn with M&Ms and hot tamales mixed in, yeah, thank me later, go do it, it doesn't quite compare to, well, I'm going to say it, ladies, I'm heterosexual male, a beautiful naked woman who wants to be with you. There's really not a comparison. But according to this sister in this experience, it is. What an illustration. It continues with some very sage advice, same reference. And before you anticipate counsel on, handling this situation alone, if you know what I'm saying, think again. It continues with this, quote, "Are your prayers for self-control and strength as intense as that? Do you persist in them? Do you pray at the very moment these desires become strong? Are you specific?" I'm sorry. Folks, I'm sorry. Do you pray at the very moment these desires become strong? Speaking as a male, we all know what, okay. Are you specific, perhaps revealing to our Father things that you would not confide to another human? Also, do you work in harmony with your prayers? One Christian woman said, end quote for a moment, "Do you notice they've only used the example of 2 single women and mothers? Do you notice this?" And this is a man writing it. Back to the quote. This Christian woman said, quote, "Don't ask for Jehovah's help to overcome sexual desires and then constantly think about sex. True, certain time," end quote. So absurd. My God. My God. Like women speak like this. Anyway, back to it. Quote, "True, certain times during the month, your sexual urges may be very great. Activate your mind by doing something else." End quote. You're a single parent. You're being very vulnerable inside this situation. You've talked to the elders. You've got all kinds of illustrations in the Watchtower about candy. And now you're praying to Jehovah about things you wouldn't tell anyone else. I'm really resisting the jokes here, folks. But listen to what this sister says you should do. And this is the governing body. Quote, Activate your mind by doing something else. Go visit someone. Go for a walk or do anything that will change the subject. Keep as busy as you can during this part of the month. Is this a low-key writing committee guy trying to talk about when women ovulate? Back to the quote. Hold on tight, folks. I'm doing my best. I'm sorry, I'm doing my best. I'm not going to edit this. Quote, another who also saw the value of keeping busy in every good work agreed, saying, scrub your windows, scrub your floor, dig in the dirt. I've done it. It works. When you see Jehovah helping you with this problem, no, not by performing a miracle, but at least by giving you the strength to cope with it each day, you will be drawn closer to him. End quote. Oh, no. Oh, no. If you've lost track and you need to believe this is real, it's the September 15th, 1980 Watchtower, pages 17 through 19. In full transparency, as a one-time single father, my son is now a full-grown man. I don't ever recall during those years going to Jehovah in prayer to discuss in detail what I wanted to do with a beautiful woman, even sharing with him things I wouldn't share with anyone else. You know, I guess fetishes, or I don't know, but Jehovah's open to it, according to this Watchtower article. But how about you? I just never felt the need to, get on bended knee and, hey, dear Heavenly Father Jehovah, that sister over there with the big brown eyes and the great legs, well, do you have a minute? I'd like to supplicate you in great detail as to what I'd like to be doing with her. I mean, it sounds like a Jehovah's Witness penthouse forum letter or something. Not that I know. You and Jehovah in a one-way conversation as a single lonely parent about wanting something he himself created me to want, but he's now telling me I can't. And how does that work exactly? And yes, I know, for the ladies listening, thank you for being here and putting up with this. This is all from a male perspective. But when you're making movies in your head as a man, with Jehovah watching on, and you're praying to him several times a day, week after week, month after month, yeah, it's not healthy. It just isn't healthy. But if you're a lonely single parent and a Jehovah's Witness in the prime of your life, and you're just miss being touched by someone special, they gave us this advice in that paragraph. And going back to the intro to this whole conversation, they know where you're vulnerable. It's the vulnerability of not just a single person, particularly a single parent who, by the way, has, watched the cooking show. They've had a little nibble of this thing called sex. That's why they're a parent. And let me tell you, I've never known anybody that doesn't eat a pizza that doesn't want more pizza. You know what I'm saying? So here we are. The advice of the Holy Spirit and Jesus from heaven to the governing body. And that advice is, and notice it's targeting women. It's targeting the sisters, single mothers. Just go scrub your windows or scrub your floor. Preferably at the Kingdom Hall, of course, because it probably needs to be clean. Or maybe go dig a hole, dig in the dirt. By the way, women, single women, if you're a Jehovah's Witness here listening and you're lonely, I'm laughing, but I know the pain of it. I've lived it. Of being lonely, of wanting companionship and sex. It's normal. But when your neighbors come over and ask you why you've dug 75 holes in your front lawn or what it is you're planting, just look. Show them this Watchtower article and tell them the faithful and discreet slave told you to go dig in the dirt anytime you're feeling a little amorous or you're ovulating. God. Unbelievable the treasures you can find in the online library. And I got to tell you, upon reading this, I'm going to share it. Am I the only one that pictures several plots of land, like acres of land, out there in upstate New York, where single Bethelites are out there with shovels digging in the dirt? You know what I'm saying? You look out there and they're like, what are all those holes out there for? Who's been digging in the dirt out there? Well, the Bethelites have. It looks like a minefield. We don't build there. What's it for? Well, it's between them and Jehovah. And whatever you do, don't make eye contact with that other single brother or sister. Just dig your damn hole and don't embarrass yourself. And yes, folks, I'm going to be childish. Of course a man wrote this. Of course a man on the writing committee wrote this stuff and found in a way to slip in an illustration. I'm sorry, ladies, about a hole. I mean, it's unreal. Dig in the dirt, make a hole. If I was a sister writing this, they would have been talking about planting a rigid tree, right? See what I'm doing there? And all of this just points to how stupid these men are. How incredibly stupid. And if it wasn't so incredibly ignorant, it's so incredibly painful. Single parents, barely functioning, raising kids. Now we tap into the stuff that really breaks their heart, being alone. Not even being able to kiss or have a good makeout session, because that's all bad. Ugh. God, I can't stand these guys. Okay, all right, I'm going to reel it in. I'm sorry. Needless to say, single-parent families face a ton of challenges inside Jehovah's Witnesses. I've lived it. And while it's inevitable when the family unit breaks down, it shouldn't be to this degree. Not in the happiest people on earth. You see, the organization goes out of its way to talk about caring for widows, caring for orphans, caring for fatherless boys, and so many more. But just as with everything else in this organization, there is always a hitch. See if you can spot the hitch. From this reference, from the Live with Jehovah's Day in Mind, page 150, paragraph 21, spot the hitch. Quote, a single mother, for example, may be helped if mature Christians show interest in her children. While showing deep respect for headship and consideration for propriety, overseers and others can offer spiritual support to members of disadvantaged families. Perhaps you and your mate or family can spend time with a fatherless boy or girl. Can you act in a considerate way towards young ones who might be plagued by loneliness? They may need empathy and confidential talk, which you could give ear to while sharing with them in the public ministry. End quote. Did you see the hitch? Did you notice anything? How about one more? I'm going to emphasize this because there's always a hitch for a single parent family to get the love. In case you missed it, this one's from the Kingdom Ministry of 2002, paragraph 6. See if you can spot it. Quote, Jehovah is deeply interested in fatherless boys and girls, and he is blessing our loving efforts to help them make the truth their own. Many who grew up in single-parent or divided households received such encouragement and are now serving faithfully as pioneers, ministerial servants, elders, traveling overseers, missionaries, or Bethel family members. Are they digging holes? No, sorry. Back to the quote. May all of us look for ways to widen out in our affection for fatherless ones in imitation of our Heavenly Father. End quote. There's always a hitch. Even with a well-intentioned person among Jehovah's Witnesses, when they're rendering aid in your congregation to a single-parent family, the end game is always the same. A life-serving Jehovah's Witnesses. And yes, fatherless kids are very vulnerable to this, people. Even when the other person means well. It's a bittersweet reality for single-parent families in this organization. And I want to take a minute in honor of someone that was incredibly kind to me from my teenage years until, frankly, I left the organization. I was lucky. He was a father figure. He was the closest thing to a father I had. He was an elder that lived in our street. He truly embraced me and he treated me like his son. And I genuinely love him. I'm forever indebted to that guy's kindness, even though he eventually shunned me and tragically passed away a few years ago. I didn't even know. I think of him daily and I always will. Lots of regrets there. Regrets that didn't have one more conversation with him before I left. It's painful stuff, not going to lie about it. But I know that I was luckier than most boys in a single-parent family in Jehovah's Witnesses. I know it. I've always known it. I can't begin to tell you how many children, and mostly mothers, eventually just get ignored and they just kind of slowly drift away from the organization. They just disappear. Very few, if anyone, even notices. I observed this personally and was likely more sensitive to it because of where I came from myself. I got it. I was one of them. I would ask myself how this could happen in God's organization, even as an elder. But I'm here to tell you it does happen. It happens weekly. And while I'm grateful for the freedom of those who escape Jehovah's Witnesses, it still leaves me with sadness for the person. First, they're in a single-parent family, which means they've lost a parent. Second, they often sit with the belief that the organization didn't care about them either. And by extension, that apparently means Jehovah never cared about them either. Do you know the impact and effect that has on someone? Especially when you show them pretty pictures and tell them everyone is going to love them, only to be ignored? It happens all the time, folks. And as a kid that grew up in a single-parent family inside Jehovah's Witnesses, I want to also share that it wasn't all bad. I made some great friendships. I learned a few things, including public speaking, how to tie a necktie. I also learned how to spot corruption and dishonesty. And I learned how to deal with boredom. There are good things to learn from this organization if you're in a single-parent family. But none of it makes up for the fact that it was my mother's vulnerability that put us there to begin with. And they prey on the vulnerable. From a 2023 article in Sage Journal, we learn the following about single-parent families. It's under the subheading, Key Areas of Vulnerability include 1. Financial instability. In 2022, nearly 23% of female-headed single-parent households lived below the poverty line, compared to 11.5% for male-headed households. This often leads to housing instability and reduced access to quality education and opportunities. 2. Time and resource constraints. A single parent must manage all household responsibilities, leaving limited time for direct engagement with children and fostering high levels of stress, known as panic mode. 3. Child development risks. Children in single-parent homes are at a higher risk for developing depression, anxiety, and behavioral issues. They're also less likely to complete college or high school. And finally, 4, educational and social outcomes. These children may face disadvantages in educational achievement, social development, and physical health, often linked to lower economic resources, end quote. But I want to add one of my own. While the Watchtower illustrations of paradise and eternal youth and pet giraffes and monkeys are all very appealing, I can assure you that they're not real. And for a single-parent family, parent or child depending on an organization that claims to support you will undoubtedly prove to be disappointing. Or maybe you want to take family advice from guys that tell you to go dig in the dirt if you're just alone and horny. If so, Jehovah's Witnesses are more than happy to provide the shovel. I want to thank you for joining me this week. Huge hugs to my people that are all part of single parent families out there. I gotcha. Thanks for being here. Wherever you are, be well.